I was in the kitchen making coffee when Ryan asked the kind of question that stops you mid-stir. "What does a boy's hug even feel like?" Came out casual, almost tossed into the air like it meant nothing. But Ryan never asked random questions without a reason. Not the Ryan I'd known for 8 months. The straight as a rail, football-playing, girlfriend-having roommate who could talk about engine oil and weekend hikes for hours. I set the mug down and glanced at him. "What?" "You heard me," he said, leaning against the counter. "I've hugged girls all my life, but never a guy." "Not really. Is it different?" There was a flicker in his eyes, the kind you notice only if you're looking too closely. I was. My mind told me to keep it light. My chest told me this was trouble. "I mean," I said slowly, "it's just a hug. Depends on the guy." He grinned. "So, show me." I froze for a second longer than I should have. He didn't blink, just waited like he knew I wouldn't refuse. And maybe he did. We stepped closer in that narrow strip of kitchen between the fridge and the counter. He opened his arms. I stepped into them. It was supposed to be nothing. But it wasn't. Ryan's arms wrapped around me with a surprising firmness, his chest solid against mine. He was taller, so his chin hovered just above my temple, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of his aftershave, woodsy, warm. I felt the slow rise and fall of his breathing, each inhale brushing faintly against my hair. "Different," he murmured. I swallowed. "How?" He didn't answer right away. His hands stayed where they were, one resting between my shoulder blades, the other at my lower back. "Feels steadier," he finally said. "Like you're not trying to pull away." Something in his voice wasn't casual anymore. I should have stepped back. I didn't. The seconds stretched until I was sure they'd snap. My palms rested against his back, feeling the heat through his t-shirt, the muscle shifting when he adjusted his stance. The contact wasn't sexual. Not yet. But there was a weight to it, a quiet charge that wrapped itself around us as tightly as his arms did. When he finally let go, it wasn't abrupt. It was slow, reluctant, like he was peeling himself away from something he'd grown comfortable with. "That was interesting," he said, eyes skimming mine for a beat too long before turning to the fridge. "Coffee ready?" I handed him the mug. My hands felt warm for no reason at all. That night, I replayed the hug more times than I'd admit. The way he held on. The way his voice dipped. Ryan had a girlfriend, Chloe, and as far as I knew, she was the only person he'd been physical with since high school. Which made his question, his arms, his lingering, all the more confusing. Or maybe I was the one making it complicated. But something told me I wasn't imagining it. 2 days later, I caught him watching me in the living room. Not staring, just observing, in that half-thoughtful, half-curious way that made it hard to breathe normally. He looked away when I met his gaze, but not before the corner of his mouth curved like he was in on a secret. In the shower later, I found myself thinking about how easily he'd touched me. About whether he'd do it again. I hated that I wanted the answer to be yes. The shift between us was subtle, but once it started, I couldn't unsee it. He'd brush past me in the hallway, his hand grazing my arm longer than necessary. When we sat on the couch, he'd lean back in a way that closed the space between us, his knee brushing mine until I moved, and he wouldn't. I didn't push him away. One evening, as I was heading to my room, he called out from the couch. "Hey, Liam." "Yeah." "About the hug thing," he paused, like weighing his words. "It's been on my mind." I stood there, waiting for more. He didn't give it. Just turned back to his phone with a small smirk, like he knew exactly what that would do to me. And maybe he did. That night, lying in bed, I told myself it was just curiosity on his part. Harmless. But the memory of his grip, firm, warm, lingering, made it hard to believe my own lies. If this was nothing, why did it feel like the start of something I shouldn't want? It was just past midnight when a soft knock pulled me out of half-sleep. "Liam? You awake?" Ryan's voice, low, almost uncertain, slipped under the door. I swung my legs off the bed and opened it. He stood there in sweatpants and a hoodie, hood down, hair slightly mussed like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "Can I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. He walked in without looking around, like he'd been here 100 times, which he had, but tonight felt different. He dropped onto the edge of my bed, elbows on his knees. "Chloe and we had another fight." I sat on the desk chair, giving him space. "What about?" He shrugged. "Nothing. Everything. She says I'm distant. I say she's dramatic. Same loop." His voice was flat, but his shoulders were tense. I'd seen him angry before, but this wasn't anger. This was something softer. He looked worn. "You want to talk about it?" I asked. He glanced at me, then looked down at his hands. I feel like I can't breathe around her lately. But with you," he stopped himself, shaking his head. "Forget it." "No, go on," I said. "With you, it's different. Easy. I don't have to be someone I'm not." The air shifted with those words. They were dangerous, and we both knew it. He leaned back against my headboard like it was the most natural thing in the world. His knees brushed mine when I sat on the bed's edge. "Remember that hug?" he said suddenly. I tried to play it off. "Yeah. I've been thinking about it." He looked me dead in the eye. "A lot." Something tightened in my chest. "Why?" He smirked, but it was faint, almost shy. "Because it felt good. Safer. I don't know how to explain it." Before I could reply, he shifted his weight and patted the space beside him. "Come here." I hesitated, but not long enough to mean it. I sat beside him, the mattress dipping under our combined weight. He opened his arms without a word. I slid into them. This hug was different. He didn't just hold me. He settled into me, like my body was something he'd been trying to fit into all along. His back pressed against my chest, and I felt the slow, deliberate way he breathed. "This is better," he murmured. I didn't trust my voice, so I said nothing. The room was dim, lit only by the blue glow from my laptop's screensaver across the room. Outside, the world was still, like we were the only two people left awake. "You ever think about how much people need this?" he said quietly. "Just being held?" "More than they admit," I answered. He tilted his head slightly, almost brushing my jaw. "Chloe never holds me like this. She's always waiting for me to let go first." I swallowed hard. "And I'm not." "No," his voice was almost a whisper now. "You don't pull away." That hit harder than it should have. We stayed like that, breathing in sync. His weight against me was steady, grounding, and dangerous. Every second that passed was another step across a line neither of us had named, but both of us could feel. When the laptop's glow dimmed and the room went darker, I thought he'd move. He didn't. Finally, he said, "If I fall asleep like this, will you wake me?" "Maybe," I said, half joking. He chuckled, but there was something in it, a relief, maybe, before he shifted enough to glance at me over his shoulder. His face was close enough that I could see the way his lips curved. "Good night, Liam," he said, but he didn't get up. Not right away. He stayed another 30 seconds, maybe more, before finally pulling himself free. At the door, he paused. "Thanks. For this. You didn't have to." I watched him disappear into the hall, my heartbeat refusing to slow. When the door clicked shut, I leaned back against the headboard, the warmth of him still clinging to my chest. This wasn't just about comfort anymore. This was about wanting something we both knew we shouldn't want, and knowing we'd want it again. End of Section 2, Hook to Section 3. Ryan has now crossed firmly into emotional cheating territory. The secrecy, the way he seeks Liam's comfort instead of Chloe's, and the lingering touches have shifted their dynamic into something intimate and unstable. The next step will bring them dangerously close to an irreversible slip. Rain hammered against the windows that Saturday afternoon, blurring the city outside into streaks of gray. The power flickered once, twice, then died completely, leaving the apartment in a muted, storm-lit haze. Ryan appeared in my doorway holding a blanket and a half-smile. "Guess it's movie night, old-school style." He didn't wait for an answer before stepping inside, kicking the door shut behind him. He set the blanket down, pulled his phone from his pocket, and tossed it aside. "No signal," he said. "Guess we'll just have to entertain each other." The way he said it wasn't overt, but the glint in his eyes was anything but innocent. We ended up on my bed with my laptop balanced between us, the storm rumbling low in the distance. The blanket was big enough for two, but not big enough to keep us from touching. At first, it was the occasional brush of his knee against mine, the shift of his arm when he reached for the bowl of popcorn. But then he leaned in, close enough for his shoulder to press against mine. Not because he had to, but because he didn't move away. "This is cozy," he said, eyes fixed on the screen. "You're taking up most of the blanket," I said. "Then come closer." I did. Or maybe I just stopped resisting. Halfway through the movie, thunder cracked overhead, and Ryan glanced at me with a grin. If Chloe saw us right now, she'd probably lose it. "Why?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Because," his gaze lingered. "It would look like I'm cheating." The air in my lungs felt heavier. "Are you?" He smirked, but there was something serious underneath. "Depends on the definition." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken things. Then he shifted under the blanket, turning toward me fully. His knee bumped my thigh, his hand brushing my arm as if by accident, though nothing about it felt accidental. "You ever wonder," he started, then trailed off. "Wonder what?" "What it'd be like if you and I—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Never mind. But I'd heard enough." The storm outside deepened, rattling the glass. The laptop's dim glow lit the sharp line of his jaw, the curve of his mouth. I caught him glancing at me, not once but twice, his eyes dropping briefly to my lips before darting away. I should have looked away. I didn't. "You can say it," I told him. He gave a short laugh, shaking his head again, though this time he didn't lean back. Instead, he stayed there, close enough that I could feel his breath. "This is dangerous," he said quietly. "I know." We stayed like that, inches apart, until the tension felt like a taut wire ready to snap. His hand slid just slightly, fingers brushing mine under the blanket. The touch was brief, almost nothing, but my pulse jumped like it was everything. For a moment I thought he might actually do it, close that last inch. Instead, he exhaled sharply and pulled back, running a hand over his face. "I need air," he muttered, throwing the blanket aside. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me staring at the space where he'd been. I sat there in the dim light, heart still pounding, the echo of his warmth lingering along my side. This wasn't a crush anymore. This wasn't harmless curiosity. This was Ryan leaning into something he couldn't name, something he didn't want to admit, and me letting him. And the worst part? I wanted him to try again. 3 days passed before Ryan spoke to me like normal again. Not avoidance, not exactly, but there was a new kind of quiet between us, like we were both pretending nothing had happened while knowing exactly what had. The weather was restless that night, a low hum of wind against the windows. I was half reading in bed when the apartment door banged open. "Liam?" Ryan's voice, urgent, uneven. I stepped into the hall. He stood there, hoodie soaked through, rain dripping from his hair. In one hand, a grocery bag. In the other, nothing. "She's gone," he said. I didn't need to ask who. He kicked off his shoes and set the bag down like it didn't matter anymore. "Chloe came over to get her stuff. Said she can't do it anymore. Said I've been somewhere else lately." I stayed silent. He paced once, twice, then stopped in front of me. "She's right. I have been." His eyes didn't leave mine. The power flickered, then cut out completely, plunging the apartment into shadow except for the silver-blue light of the storm outside. Ryan stepped closer. I could smell the rain on him, sharp and cold, mixing with something warmer underneath. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he said. "I've been trying to figure it out. But every time I do, I end up here. With you." My throat was dry. "Ryan. No, let me say this." His voice was low but steady now, like he'd decided something. "I don't care if it's messed up. I don't care if it's not what I'm supposed to want. I want this." Before I could process it, he pulled me into a hug. Not the curious, testing kind from the kitchen. Not the slow, lazy hold from that midnight conversation. This was different, desperate, almost trembling. His arms locked around me like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. The wet fabric of his hoodie chilled my skin, but his body was hot underneath. I could feel his heartbeat, fast, unsteady, thudding against my chest. "I don't want to let go," he murmured into my shoulder. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of him sink in. My hands found his back, fingers curling into the damp fabric. Every reason to stop this screamed in my head, but none of them were loud enough. We stayed like that, unmoving except for the rise and fall of our breathing. The storm outside cracked, lightning throwing our silhouettes onto the wall, two shapes pressed so close they looked like one. "You know this changes everything," I said finally. "Good," he whispered. He pulled back just enough to look at me, but not enough to break the contact. His forehead almost touched mine. "This is ours," he said. "No one else has to know." There was a question buried in those words, and a promise, and something like a dare. My chest tightened. I didn't answer, not out loud. But I didn't move away either. We stood there until the lightning faded and the darkness closed in again. His hand slid down my arm, fingers brushing mine before settling there, holding on like a final anchor. The storm roared. The apartment held its breath. And somewhere between the thunder and the silence, I knew we'd already crossed the line. End of section 4, final beat. The story closes not with a kiss or an explicit confession, but with an embrace that's far more intimate than either of them intended to allow, cementing the emotional and physical infidelity, yet leaving the audience to wonder just how far they'll go next.